Mr. Lincoln, are you for or against slavery? Please answer with a simple affirmative or negative. I would say I'm now against slavery, but my stance has evolved over time. When did you first come in contact with slavery? My first exposure to slavery was when I was a child, traveling down the Mississippi River. I saw slaves on other rafts, and I was averted to the idea that one man owned another. As time went by, I traveled several other times down the river and saw the same thing. Those images have always been with me, and I believe there is something inherently wrong with slavery, although I do not believe it would be an easy problem to fix. So would you agree you're an abolitionist? I would answer I've always hated slavery as much as an abolitionist, but I would not consider myself a full-time abolitionist. I have been rather quiet in years past about slavery, because I do not believe everything abolitionists do. Abolitionists argue for the freeing of all slaves, but do not believe in the legality of this action. I do not believe those in free states have the right to meddle in the affairs of the slave states when it comes to slavery. It is not as simple as declaring all slaves are free. We simply cannot do that. Abolitionists argue that black people are equal with white people. Do you agree with them? I believe there are certain rights black people have that we do not give to them. They have the right to eat and to live freely and enjoy what they earn by working with their hands. In that regard, every man is equal to all other men. We all have the same right to experience life as it was meant to be. Slavery deprives black people of this right. It forces them to work without the enjoyment of reward, which should be an inherent right. It also, in many cases, denies them the freedom of eating when and what they want, and living where and how they want. However, I say all this with a brief concession. I am not arguing black people should have every right that white people have. Nature has prescribed the white man a superior position over the black man, and this is reinforced with the physical differences between the two races. I do not agree with blacks running for office or intermarrying with the white race, because as long as we live, there will always be a gap between the two races. So yes, slavery deprives black people of certain rights they should have, such as freedom to live on their own and eat what they have grown. Because of that, I do not believe in slavery. Yet I realize there is a difference between the two races that cannot be bridged, nor should we even attempt to. So if you are not an abolitionist, what would you call yourself? True, I'm not an abolitionist. I would call myself anti-slavery. I do not believe in slavery, nor does my family. The practice does not fit with my moral principles. I believe it is morally wrong for a man to own another man. However, I am not like abolitionists in that I want to charge into the South and uproot slavery and make blacks equal with whites. I believe that is unconstitutional and would seriously damage the economy in the South. Slaves are a crucial part of the economy down in the plantations, and barging in and taking all the slaves away would not only hurt the economy, it would also raise all kinds of social issues once slaves were free to live alongside whites. Like I mentioned before, I do not believe in slavery, but I also believe there is no easy fix. Your opponent, Judge Douglas, has argued before for the expansion of slavery westward. Are you in favor of this idea or opposed to it? I'm very much opposed to this idea. I believe slavery is already an issue which is causing our nation to splinter. Expanding the problem westward will not accomplish anything other than magnifying the debate. We have our hands full trying to figure out how to remedy the issue in the few states slavery is legal. The last thing we need is more states with the same problem. We need to isolate the slavery states and then conceive a way to stop slavery without damaging the economy or our culture. Well, give us some of the ideas that you have considered to fix slavery. Of course, there are a couple of plans I have supported in the past that I hope might have an impact on ending slavery in a graceful and peaceful way. One of the easiest is to allow individual slave owners to free their slaves, or to let states decide for themselves the best way to end slavery. Of course, not every slave owner will want to free their slaves, especially those with a large number of them. So while this seems like the easiest plan, it does have its flaws. One way we might overcome the majority of people resisting the idea of freeing their slaves is to compensate them. Another plan I have supported includes the government compensating slave owners if they agree to free their slaves. This would free the slaves and would hopefully minimize the loss of the slave owner until they could find hired work. Another issue, however, arises with how to integrate the free slaves. I stated earlier that blacks living alongside whites with the same privileges could cause problems. One popular idea is to gather up all the slaves who have been freed, compensate their owners, and send the blacks back to Africa, where they could live with their own people. This would effectively minimize the conflict between whites and free blacks. Once again, however, it would be a great task to convince owners to give up the slaves, and still a greater task to round up all the slaves to send them back to where they belong. I'm willing to mix and match elements of these plans to try and end slavery without ripping our nation apart. You said earlier that your stance on slavery has evolved over time. How so? Yes, I would revise that claim specifically to say that my stance on how to deal with slavery has changed over time. I have always personally believed against slavery, but I thought it was an issue that would resolve itself. I had hoped that we could find a way where those for slavery and those opposed to it could live in harmony. However, I see now that the matter of slavery has thrust itself into national affairs. We cannot go on living like this, with two sides opposing each other. We need to find a way to get rid of slaves, whether it's sending them back to Africa, or simply keeping them on the plantations but paying them. But right now we're headed for disaster. Do you have any closing remarks? I want to remind everyone who is opposed to my ideas that I'm not trying to ruin your livelihood. I understand the importance of slave labor to your plantations, nor am I trying to make blacks equal with whites. I do, however, want to find a solution to slavery that will compromise between abolitionists and plantation owners. You might say I'm advocating for the extinction of slavery over a long period of time. I do not wish for hasty, drastic measures, but rather for a slow, thorough approach to get rid of slavery while keeping our country intact.